Hey everyone, it's Megan, and today I thought it'd be fun to take a little trip in time, travel back into time to the 1880s and look at names from this decade, from 1880 up until 1890. And this is part of a new series that I'll be doing, looking at names from different time periods. And so this period of time is particularly exciting to lovers of names because it is where we get our first data on names here in the United States. They were first recorded in the 1880s. So this is kind of as far back as we can go. This time period is also pretty interesting because it's the era of invention. A big chunk of the second industrial revolution happened during this time. And so of course we'll look at the most popular names of this decade, but I thought a decade is 10 years and 10 is a good number, and so I would pick 10 names, just kind of handpick an assortment of names that were pretty popular for boys and for girls during this time period and kind of talk a little bit about those and how usable or popular they are now. And I'd love to hear your feedback, of course, in the comments below. So come take a little trip back in time with me now. So here are 10 fairly common boys' names of the 1880s. First I have Walter. Walter was number 13, pretty popular. It is now number 342, which is actually a bit more popular than I thought Walter would be. It's a German name meaning army ruler, and from 1880 up until 1930, it was in the top 20 here in the United States. And it stayed after that in the top 100 until the early 1970s. Walter, when I think of this name, I think of it as having a very distinctly distinguished vintage feel to it. Very kind of handsome. I picture a handsome man. It does remind me a little bit of Walt Disney, and I know many of you are fans of Anne of Green Gables, that series as well, so it might remind you of Walter Shirley or Walter Blythe. Next name I have is Clarence. Clarence was number 18 then, and it is now not in the top 1,000. I would be very surprised to meet a little boy named Clarence now in 2014. It's a Latin name that means bright. It's a nice meaning. It's also, there's a title, the Duke of Clarence. Clarence was in the top 100 until the 1950s, and it has just declined and declined since then, and now it is not in the top 1,000. Then I have Louis. This name can also be pronounced Louis. It was number 19 then. It is currently number 315, so it's not unheard of. It's not one of these names that is just dropped off the top 1,000. And it has Old German and French roots. It means renowned warrior. It's one of my favorite male classic names, I have to admit. Also, too, I think in part it's a family name for me, so I'm a little bit biased. And it was in the top 100 until the late 1950s. And it's declined a bit since then. Like I said, it's number 315. Another family name for me is Roy. Roy was number 25. It is now number 524, and it has English, French, Scottish, and Gaelic background to it. It means king. That's a fun meaning. And it's got a very simple, strong sound to it. If you're looking for a strong sounding one-syllable name, perhaps some of you authors looking for an older name that is still really usable. Roy stayed in the top 100 until the late 60s, and it's declined since then. Next I have Jessie. Jessie was number 28 in the 1880s. It's currently number 158. It's a Hebrew name that means gift, and I always thought Jessie had a really cool sound to it. It's got, just a cool vibe. It also has a really cool cowboy feel. I think of the song Jessie's Girl, of course, and it was in the top 100 until 1933, and it's kind of gone up and down since then. It picked up some popularity in the 1970s, but in the last eight years or so, it has dwindled in numbers, but I do think Jessie is a cool choice. Then I have Peter. Peter was number 37. It's now number 208. It's a Greek name meaning rock. There are so many wonderful literary Peters. Oh my goodness. And I think because of those characters, it's really endeared me to this name. Peter, I think, is so timeless. It's actually the lowest that it's been in popularity right now at 208. It was in the top 100 until the late 90s and in the top 200 until just 2 years ago. So Peter has been pretty popular since names have been recorded. Next up, I have Elmer. Elmer was number 38 then, and it is not in the top 1,000 now. It's an English name that means noble. I actually honestly have a hard time seeing this one making a comeback, although my fellow namer and name sister Elena really likes this name, so I kind of saw it and included it for her. It was in the top 100 until the late 1930s and has just steadily decreased since then. And it's since left the top 1,000. I actually like the beginning sound, the ELM, the elm sound. I think that's kind of cool. Elm might make an interesting kind of nature name. But Elmer on its own, I just can't get past the Elmer Fudd association or even Elmer's glue. So it would make a really interesting choice for a baby born today, but I can't quite see it making a comeback, if that makes sense. Another interesting name is Grover. Grover was number 56 in the 1880s, and now it is not in the top 1,000. It's an English name that means living near a tree grove, and it kind of sounds like a name that a celebrity would use for their baby now to me. Of course, there was President Grover Cleveland and the Blue Muppet Grover, which is why I think people might think of it as being a little less usable because of the Muppet. Grover briefly entered the top 100 during this time period, but has not seen the top 1,000 since 1974. Next is Otto. Otto was number 67 in the 1880s. It is now number 696. It's a German name that means wealthy, and I could actually see this as a celebrity baby name as well. Otto was in the top 100s until 1899, and it has since decreased. It actually fell off of the top 1,000 from 1975 to 2010, and it has been making a comeback the last couple of years. And I can kind of see why. It has that vintage feel people are looking towards, and also lots of boys' names that end in O just kind of have a cool sound to them. And then the last one I have for this list for boys is Calvin. Calvin was number 115 then, and it's number 195 now. Not too different. Calvin's a Latin name, doesn't have the best meaning. It means bald. Calvin is interesting because it's never been more popular than spot number 44, and it's never been lower than 231 since names have been recorded. There are lots of recognizable Calvins in pop culture, like Calvin Klein or Calvin and Hobbes. Okay, so before we take a look at the girls' names though, I thought it'd be fun to pick our favorites of the boys' names that I just mentioned. So I'll just write them really quickly on the screen and go over them. So we talked about Walter, Clarence, Louis or Louis, Roy, Jesse, Peter, Elmer, Grover, Otto, and Calvin. Put your favorites in the comments below because I'd love to hear what your favorites are. My favorite is Peter. I also like Jesse and Louis, but I think if I had to pick one, I would pick Peter. And now we'll look at 10 girls' names that were fairly common in this period. First I have Minnie. Minnie was number 6 then and is not in the top 1,000 now. May remind you of Minnie Mouse. It began as a nickname or diminutive name of larger names like Wilhelmina or Minerva. I've even heard people use this as a nickname for Hermione. And you will see in this time period, many women were given nicknames just as their given name. That was more common than having a longer name and going by a nickname. If they knew they were just going to call you Minnie, they just went ahead and named you Minnie. And so this was such a popular name, Minnie, in the beginning of the 1880s up until the 1920s when it lost steam and it dropped out of the top 100, and it stayed in the top 200 until 1945, but it has really decreased since then, and in 1971 it fell out of the top 1,000. Then I have Ida. Ida was number 7 and is now not in the top 1,000. I would be surprised to meet a little Ida as well. It's a German name that means industrious or a worker, a good worker, and it has a really unique sound to me for 3 little letters, Ida. In some parts of the world, this name is also pronounced Ida. And it fell out of the top 100 in the 1930s, and it fell out of the top 1,000 in 1986. Next up is Bessie. Bessie was number 13, now not in the top 1,000 either. It's a diminutive of the name Elizabeth, meaning pledged to God. There are so many adorable nicknames for the name Elizabeth. This one, though, does have a very old-timey feel to me, Bessie. I don't really see Bessie being a popular nickname for Elizabeth anytime soon. It was in the top 100 until the late 1920s, and it fell out of the top 1,000 in 1975. Then I have Leona. Leona was number 116. It's currently number 734. And I could see people using this name now, definitely. It's a Latin name that means lioness. It's kind of cool. And like I said, it's a cool choice if you're looking for something familiar but not popular. It might remind you of the singer Leona Lewis, or there's a less popular singer that I prefer, Leona Nash. And this name has really, truly roller coastered in and out of popularity, and it fell off the charts for a bit in the 1980s and 90s, and it just kind of re-entered a couple years back, probably because of Leona Lewis. Then I have Lula. Lula was number 43 and is not in the top 1,000 now. Lula was another name that started as a diminutive or a nickname for many names, many of the Lou sounding names like Louise or Lucy and so on. I love Lula as a nickname for Tallulah, and I really love that repeating L sound in many girl names. Lula was in the top 100 until 1912 and in the top 1,000 until 1965. It's not really a nickname that we even hear too commonly anymore. Next is Ada. Ada was number 46. It's now currently number 436. It can also be pronounced Otto, depending on where you are and how you prefer to pronounce it. It's a German name meaning noble. It's actually a name coming back into fashion. It fell out of the top 1,000 in the 1990s, but has steadily been climbing back into popularity. And I wonder if Ada could be the next Ava, because they have a very similar feel, but Ada is so much less popular. Then I have Blanche. Blanche was number 53, not in the top 1,000 now. It's a French name that means white, and I can't help but think of the Golden Girls when I say this name. It was in the top 100 until the 1920s, and then it was in the top 1,000 until 1964, where it fell out of the top 1,000. And it's one of those vintage girls' names that I just can't see coming back anytime soon. It's just distinctly Golden Girls in many people's minds. Next up I have Elsie. Elsie was number 55 then, and it's number 365 now. It's a diminutive of the name Elizabeth as well, so it also means pledged to God. And it has a really charming, kind of sweet vintage feel that people are really loving, in particular for girls' names. It was in the top 100 until the 1930s, and then in 1976 up until 2004, it left the top 1,000, so it has come back, and it has come back hugely since 2004. Like I said, it's number 365, and it is a name on the rise, so watch out for Elsie. Then I have Flora. Flora was number 75 then, and it is currently not in the top 1,000. It's a Latin name that means flower, and I had to include this name because one of my oldest friends, a little girl that I knew since I was, I think, 6 years old, has this name, and I think Flora is very usable now. It has an old sound, but it has a familiar sound like Laura or Cora, or some of those aura sounding names. I could definitely see people liking this. It's got that vintage vibe with the familiar sound. It hasn't been in the top 1,000 since 1972, and never been more popular than number 68, which is what it was in 1880. And then the last girl's name on the list that I have for you is Ollie. Ollie was number 106 and is not in the top 1,000 now. It was more popular than Olivia at its time. Olive was around the 80th spot, so it may have stemmed from there, Olive as a nickname. But again, we see this theme of kind of nickname names being used as given names for girls at the time. And Ollie fell out of the top 1,000 in 1960. So let's look at these girls' names that I just talked about and pick our favorites. So I talked about Minnie, Ida, Bessie, Leona, Lula, Ada, Blanche, Elsie, Flora, and Ollie. So my favorites, oh, I love Lula. I just think that's so cute. I also really like Elsie, so can I have two favorites? Sure, why not? You can pick as many favorites as you want. I usually try and make myself pick one, but why? Okay, now let's take a quick peek at the top 10 names from the 1880s. So I'm not going to go into detail on these, but I thought I would just take a look at the charts. So the top 10 names for boys, number 1 was John, 2 was William, 3 was James, 4 was George, 5 was Charles, 6 was Frank, 7 was Joseph, 8 was Henry, 9 was Robert, and 10 was Thomas. So all 10 of these names automatically, I think, have very classic sounds. If I had to not look at anything and write down 10 classic boys' names, I think I would come up with most of this list. And something kind of interesting is William was number 2 then and is currently number 5. So William is a name that was a top 10 name then and now. Okay, now let's look at the girls' names that were popular at the time. Number 1 was Mary, 2 was Anna, 3 was Emma, 4 was Elizabeth, 5 was Margaret, 6 was Minnie, 7 was Ida, 8 was Bertha, 9 was Clara, and 10 was Alice. Oh, I really love a lot of old-fashioned girls' names. I could easily see myself using almost half of those names. And 2 of those names were in the top 10 then and now, and those are Emma and Elizabeth. Emma was number 3, it's currently number 2, and Elizabeth was number 4, it's currently number 10. So that's kind of interesting that William, Emma, and Elizabeth are top 10 names then and now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these names. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you comment below what your favorites were. If you missed any, I will have them written down in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Next time, I will probably be coming to you from the 1890s. Have a wonderful day.